Throughout the course of history, men and women have lived and died. Looking back from this place in time, it is clear that people long ago really did some really dumb things. And in order to understand how they died, we must first understand how they lived. These are the stories of how they died. Vincent van Gogh is largely considered one of the greatest Dutch painters of all time. From his dark works like The Potato Eaters to his much brighter works of sunflowers, Vincent van Gogh worked hard to hone his talent. Although there are more than 800 oil paintings and 700 drawings that make up his life's work, he sold only one painting during his lifetime. Always desperately poor, he survived on his faith and the generosity of his brother, who believed in him more than anyone. Vincent Willem van Gogh was born in the small village of Zundert in the southern Netherlands on March 30th, 1853. Vincent was the eldest of 6 children born to Protestant minister Theodorus van Gogh and Anna Carbentus. However, Vincent was not the first child born to the Van Goghs. Another son, also given the name Vincent Willem van Gogh, had been stillborn on the same date, just 1 year earlier. Vincent's mother, who was never very loving or affectionate, would take her children on frequent walks in the countryside near Zundert. Anna, an amateur artist herself, wanted her children to have an appreciation for nature and encouraged her children to sketch what they saw in the fields. This suited Vincent just fine, as he was a quiet child and preferred to spend his free time wandering about the countryside, observing and sketching the bugs, flowers, and trees. When Vincent was 16, he was offered an apprenticeship as an art dealer by his uncle at the Hague branch of the art dealers Goupil and C. In 1872, Vincent began what would become a lifelong correspondence with his younger brother Theo, who was also working at Goupil and C in Brussels. After completing his apprenticeship, Vincent was transferred to London. While he was in London, Vincent was presented with a completely different reality to what life was like in his rural hometown. He was impressed by the city. London was lit by streetlights, powered by electricity, and was just so modern to him. Vincent became acquainted with the traditions of Victorian England. He enjoyed the modern ideas of Christmas that were full of presents, Christmas trees, and big gatherings for dinner. The idea of a Victorian Christmas was fueled by Van Gogh's love for Charles Dickens. This was one of the happiest times for Vincent. He was successful at his work, and at 20 years old he was earning more money than his father. But all of this was about to change. Vincent developed an infatuation with his landlady's daughter, Eugenie Lawyer, and was rejected after he confessed his feelings to her. She revealed that she was secretly engaged to someone else. After this revelation, Vincent became more isolated and more religious than ever. It was at this time his father and uncle arranged for Vincent to transfer to Paris in 1875. It was in Paris where he became resentful of the social injustices, capitalism, and poverty that were so prevalent in the city. Vincent had become disgusted by how Goupil and C commodified works of art. He was dismissed from his job a year later. Vincent felt compelled to serve humanity, so he decided to follow in the footsteps of his father and become a minister. However, he was unable to get an appointment with the church. He left to do missionary work in Bornage, a coal mining region in southwestern Belgium. To show support for his penniless congregation, he gave up his comfortable lodgings at a bakery to a homeless woman and moved into a coal miner's shack where he slept on straw. His fetid living conditions did not sit well with the church authorities, who then fired him for, quote, undermining the dignity of the priesthood. After much pressure from his parents, Vincent moved to Eton to live with them. It was at this time that Vincent, after a suggestion from his brother Theo, decided to study and become an artist in earnest. He practiced drawing and frequently worked outside. During this time, his brother Theo had been appointed manager of Goupil & Cie in Paris. He helped to support Vincent financially by sending him 50 francs per month so that he could focus entirely on his art. Vincent's parents were not very supportive of their eldest son and were extremely disappointed that he had chosen the life of an artist. In their eyes, this was a monumental failure. It did not help that Vincent had now fallen in love with his recently widowed cousin, Guy Voss. Guy wanted nothing to do with Vincent, but he persisted in his efforts to marry her. Vincent was so distraught at the rejection that he held his hand over the flame of an oil lamp, and, as the story goes, one of his family members blew out the flame, and then an argument ensued with his father. Vincent moved out of his parents' house on Christmas Day, 1881. He found a new home in The Hague. While in The Hague, Vincent really began to develop as an artist. He had not yet started to work with expensive oil paints, as he believed that he was not good enough to work with them. So he focused on drawing and eventually using watercolors. Vincent also learned to paint portraits, but he could only afford to hire people from the streets to use as models. In early 1882, Vincent met Sienne Hornick, a former prostitute who was with child and unable to continue working as a lady of the night. Vincent took pity on Sienne and was determined to care for her, her 5-year-old daughter, and eventually her baby. Sienne became both his model and his lover. Theo did not approve of Vincent's relationship with Sienne, but continued to send him money. In June, Vincent suffered a bout of gonorrhea and spent 3 weeks in the hospital. He eventually realized that his relationship with Sienne was not working out the way he had hoped, so he broke it off. In 1883, Vincent moved back in with his parents at his father's parsonage in Eton. He worked in a small studio at the back of the house for a short time, and a few months later he was able to rent a larger space somewhere else in the village. The village of Eton was home to many farmers, weavers, and rural laborers, who Vincent sketched and painted at every opportunity. In 1884, he wrote to Theo and proposed that he would start giving him his works in return for the allowance that Vincent had been provided. The idea was that Theo would sell the paintings in Paris and keep the profits. Unfortunately, the French were not interested in the distinctively dark-toned paintings that Vincent sent. The French wanted paintings with lots of color. At the end of March 1885, shortly after his father died, Vincent left his family's home and moved to Antwerp, Belgium, where he continued to paint. While in Antwerp, Vincent was hit hard by poverty. He had a strong work ethic and chose to spend most of his monthly stipend on canvas and paint, which meant he had little money left for food. Vincent survived mostly on bread, coffee, and lots of cigarettes. Along with his poor diet and chain smoking, Vincent also ingested paint by wetting his brush with his mouth. It might not seem like a big deal, but paint at that time contained significant amounts of lead. Eventually, Vincent was so poor that he could no longer afford to pay his rent. So, he decided that he was going to join his brother in Paris. Vincent arrived in Paris unannounced in 1886. While he was there, Theo introduced Vincent to the colorful works of Impressionist painters like Claude Monet. Vincent also met many other artists who opened his eyes to the latest trends in French painting styles, including the artist Paul Gauguin. Vincent gained much inspiration from the Impressionist work of many Japanese paintings, and all of the people that he had met had an influence on his work, and he was inspired to experiment. Vincent began to develop his own style with bright colors and short brushstrokes. After just 2 years in Paris, Vincent began to tire of the busy city life. It had all become too much for him. He left Paris in February 1888 and settled in Arles in the southeastern part of France. While in Arles, Vincent dreamt of setting up an artist colony, and he decided to rent 4 rooms in the Yellow House on Place Lamartine, hoping that other artists would join his colony. It would turn out that Paul Gauguin would be the first and only artist to move in with him. Vincent was so excited when he heard that Gauguin was coming that he filled up his room with bright and cheery sunflowers. Although the two artists had very different views on the creation of art, Vincent and Gauguin collaborated and produced some of the most exceptional pieces of art during this time. But because of their different personalities, tension between the two artists began to rise. When Gauguin threatened to leave Arles in December 1888, Vincent became so agitated and distraught that he snapped. Later that evening, Vincent severed his own ear and delivered it to a prostitute at a nearby brothel. When he was questioned about the incident, Vincent claimed that he had no recollection of the event. Within a few days, it was ordered that he be placed under hospital care. Theo, newly engaged to Johanna Bonger, arrived on Christmas Day and visited Vincent in the hospital. After 2 weeks, Vincent recovered and returned to the Yellow House in early January 1889. However, he suffered from hallucinations and delusions of being poisoned. By March, the police closed his house after a petition by 30 townspeople who called him La Fou Rue, the red-headed madman, insisted that he be committed to an asylum. Vincent returned to the hospital for a short time before he left Arles and voluntarily entered an asylum at Saint Remy de Provence. When he had good days, Vincent painted the institution's walled garden and eventually was allowed to work outside the hospital. But Vincent's mental health continued to swing in different directions. At one point of extreme confusion, he ate his oil paints, and they had to be taken away. Despite the relapses that he suffered with his mental health, Vincent was remarkably productive at Saint Remy. He completed around 150 paintings in the space of 1 year, including the well-known painting, The Starry Night. In January 1890, Vincent received a birth announcement. Theo and Johanna had welcomed a son who they named Vincent Willem van Gogh. Vincent was so honored that he sent them a special painting from the hospital called Almond Blossom. In May, Vincent left the clinic in Saint Remy and moved closer to his brother in Paris in the suburb of Auvers-sur-Oise. After the birth of his nephew, Vincent struggled with the guilt of the burden that he had placed on his brother. On July 27, 1890, in despair and overcome with loneliness, or maybe it was the probability that his mental illness would never be cured, Vincent shot himself in the abdomen while he was painting in the wheat fields. However, he did not immediately die. He walked home and was attended by doctors. The following morning, Theo rushed to his brother's side, finding Vincent in good spirits and smoking a pipe. 2 days later, on July 29, 1890, Vincent van Gogh died from an infection caused by the gunshot wound. He was 37 years old. 6 months later, Vincent's loving and generous brother, Theo, also passed away. Theo's widow Johanna inherited a large collection of Vincent's paintings, drawings, and letters. She made it her mission to help promote Vincent's life's work. She loaned out his works for exhibitions, and in 1914 she published the letters that Vincent had written throughout his lifetime in order to tell his story. Johanna also had Theo's remains reinterred to his brother's gravesite in a cemetery in Anvers. Today, the brothers lie side by side with identical tombstones. Theo and Johanna's son Vincent inherited his uncle's artwork and eventually founded the Van Gogh Museum, which opened in Amsterdam in 1973. It has been a long-held theory that Vincent van Gogh shot himself on July 27, 1890. However, in a 2011 biography of Van Gogh, co-authors Stephen Nafa and Gregory White Smith presented a different theory. By examining the forensic evidence of the bullet wound and other accounts from that day, their theory suggests that Vincent van Gogh may have actually been accidentally shot by a teenage boy from town who was known to taunt the artist. So, tell me, what do you think happened to Vincent van Gogh? Let me know in the comments below. Before I leave you, I would like to thank all of the talented creators who provided Van Gogh's artwork, the Old Stone Church, the Art Gallery, and the Old Time Cash Register. I will link their gallery IDs in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to hear more stories of how they died, please help my channel grow by giving this video a thumbs up, clicking that subscribe button, and sharing this video with your friends. Be sure to turn on the notifications so you never miss a new story, and I will talk to you next time. Bye guys.